The emergency lights painted everything red inside the command center. Lyra pressed her six-fingered hands against the tactical display and watched another coalition ship vanish from the screen. That made 58 losses in the past 4 hours. The Ravager swarms were winning, and everyone in the room knew it. Admiral Wren stood silent beside her, his scaled face showing no emotion. The Tamari people were known across the galaxy for their peaceful nature and diplomatic skills. Lyra had negotiated 17 trade agreements and settled disputes between 6 different species. None of that mattered now. The Ravagers did not negotiate. They consumed. Through the viewport, the battle played out in terrible silence. Bioships the size of mountains twisted and writhed through space, their organic hulls pulsing with sickly green light. They moved like living things because they were living things. Each vessel was grown rather than built, filled with thousands of drone warriors that existed only to feed their hive minds' endless hunger. The Coalition fleet fired another volley. Energy beams lanced across the darkness, striking Ravager vessels with precision. For a moment, the bioships recoiled. Then their hulls rippled and changed, adapting to the frequency of the weapons. The next volley splashed harmlessly against their transformed armor. "They are learning too fast," Wren said quietly. His translator unit rendered his native clicking language into Galactic Common. "Every tactic we employ becomes useless within minutes." Lyra could not argue. The Coalition represented 47 different species, each contributing their finest military vessels. Their combined knowledge spanned millions of cycles of peaceful development. Yet the Ravagers, primitive by comparison, were crushing them through sheer adaptability and numbers. A young sensor officer named Pax called out from his station. His people came from a high-gravity world and stood only waist-high to Lyra, but his skills were exceptional. "Admiral, the civilian convoy is requesting immediate evacuation routes. They can detect the battle from their position. 2 million refugees fleeing from already consumed worlds waited behind the defensive line. If the fleet fell, they would be next." Wren straightened his posture. "Send all available ships to form a protective sphere around the convoy. We will hold this position until our last breath." The remaining 12 Coalition warships moved into formation. Lyra knew it would not be enough. Mathematics did not lie. The Ravagers had at least 300 bioships converging on their location. Even if every Coalition ship fought perfectly, the outcome was predetermined. "Broadcast a final distress call," Wren ordered. "All frequencies. All known civilizations. Perhaps someone will arrive in time to at least save the refugees." Lyra composed the message herself. She kept it simple and direct. The Thousand Suns sector was falling. The Ravager swarms would break through and threaten core Coalition worlds. Any species capable of rendering aid should respond immediately. The message transmitted across quantum channels, reaching hundreds of star systems within seconds. Response came quickly. The Drazi offered thoughts and prayers. The Kel sent condolences. The Yorn promised to remember their sacrifice. No one sent ships. Then a strange transmission arrived from a system Lyra had never heard of. The signal was crude, barely holding coherent form across the distance. The translator struggled with the language before finally rendering it understandable. "This is the human fleet responding to your distress call. We are preparing ships now. Hold your position. Help is coming." Pax pulled up data on the origin point. The signal came from a system called Sol. Records indicate first contact occurred 53 cycles ago. They barely qualified for faster-than-light travel. Their civilization is extremely young by galactic standards. Lyra felt hope and disappointment war within her. Someone had answered. But what could one primitive species possibly do against the Ravagers? "How many ships are they sending?" Wren asked. The response came after a brief delay. 300 vessels. Arrival estimated at 47 minutes. The command center fell silent. 300 ships from a species that supposedly just learned to travel between stars? The Coalition had assumed humans were barely capable of defending their own system. "It is a mistake," Wren said finally. "Their translation systems must have malfunctioned. They likely mean to send 3 ships, perhaps 30 at most." Lyra wanted to believe otherwise, but logic agreed with the Admiral. No young species possessed that kind of military infrastructure. Even if they did, jumping directly into an active combat zone required navigation skills that took thousands of cycles to master. The humans would probably arrive scattered across several light hours, making them easy targets. Still, any help was better than none. The Ravagers pressed their advantage. Another coalition ship took catastrophic damage and began evacuating crew. The bioships were closing the distance now, preparing for the final assault. Their organic weapons could dissolve hull plating like acid through flesh. Lyra returned to the viewport and stared out at the approaching swarm. Her people believed in the essential goodness of all living things. They had built their civilization on cooperation and mutual understanding. The Ravagers challenged everything she thought she knew about the universe. Some things simply wanted to destroy. 47 minutes passed with agonizing slowness. The coalition ships formed their protective sphere. Weapons charged. Crews prepared for the end. Pack suddenly straightened at his console. "Admiral, I am detecting massive spatial distortions. Multiple signatures. They are appearing right on top of our position." Ren's eyes widened. "That is impossible. No one exits faster than light travel that close to a gravity well. The mathematics alone would require computing power beyond anything we possess." Reality itself seemed to tear open 10,000 kilometers from the coalition fleet. Space twisted and groaned. Then something emerged, ships, hundreds of them. They appeared in perfect formation, each vessel precisely positioned. Not scattered. Not damaged from the dangerous jump. Perfect, the human fleet had arrived. Space looked wrong where the human ships appeared. Pax had never seen quantum exit signatures that sharp, that controlled. His instrument screamed warnings about gravitational stress. But the 300 vessels hung in formation without a single navigation error. It should have been impossible. Lyra moved closer to the tactical display. The computer was still cataloging the new arrivals, rendering them as blue icons against the red mass of Ravager bioships. Each human vessel registered as significantly smaller than coalition cruisers, but their energy signatures read strangely. Too much power for ships that size. Magnify visual on the nearest vessel, Admiral Ren commanded. The main view screen shifted, focusing on a human warship 300 kilometers away. Lyra felt her breath catch. The ship looked nothing like coalition designs. Where their vessels featured smooth curves and elegant lines, this thing was all brutal angles and heavy plating. Armor covered every surface in overlapping layers. Weapons bristled from dozens of hardpoints along the hull. It looked primitive, aggressive, and completely functional. "That is not an exploration vessel," Ren observed. "That is a ship built specifically for war." The Coalition had warships too, but they served dual purposes. Scientific research, diplomatic missions, cargo transport. Peaceful functions alongside defensive capabilities. The human ship before them served only one purpose. Someone had designed it to kill, and they had done so with terrible efficiency. A communication channel opened. The voice that came through spoke in heavily accented Galactic Common. "Coalition Fleet, this is Commodore Walsh commanding Human Task Force 7. We received your distress call. Please transmit tactical data and fall back to defensive positions." Ren activated his own transmitter. "Commodore, welcome to the Thousand Suns sector. I must warn you that the Ravagers possess extraordinary adaptive capabilities. They can modify their bioships to counter any weapon within minutes. We have tried 17 different attack strategies and all have failed." A brief pause followed. Then Walsh responded and Lyra detected something unexpected in the human's tone. Confidence. Not the bravado of someone who did not understand the danger, but the steady assurance of someone who had planned for exactly this scenario. "Admiral, we appreciate the warning. Earth intelligence has been studying the Ravagers for the past 6 months. We have prepared accordingly. 6 months. They had been monitoring from their distant system and analyzing the threat while building this fleet." Lyra felt a chill despite the warm command center. How much military infrastructure did humanity possess if they could assemble 300 warships in half a cycle? The Ravagers noticed the new arrivals. Their bioships, which had been converging on the Coalition fleet, suddenly shifted course. The hive mind recognized fresh prey. Over 200 organic vessels turned as one and accelerated toward the human formation. "Commodore, they are redirecting toward your position," Pax called out. "I count 237 hostile vessels. Mass displacement indicates each one is between 2 and 5 times larger than your ships." "Acknowledged," Walsh replied calmly. "All human vessels advance to engagement range. Wall formation. Prepare weapons grid alpha." The human fleet moved forward, not spreading out or taking evasive positions but forming a solid line and heading directly toward the Ravager swarm. Lyra exchanged glances with Ren. Every tactical manual in the Coalition database would classify such a maneuver as suicide. "What are they doing?" Pax whispered. They should be using their mobility advantage, forcing the Ravagers to chase them. The distance between the two forces closed rapidly. 5,000 kilometers, 4,000, 3,000. The Ravagers were opening their organic weapon ports, preparing to unleash the dissolving bioplasma that had melted through Coalition shields all day. At 2,000 kilometers, the human ships stopped advancing. Their formation tightened further. Every vessel aligned perfectly with its neighbors, creating a unified wall of metal and weapons. Walsh's voice came across all channels. Target lock confirmed, fire. Light erupted from 300 ships simultaneously, but not the familiar glow of energy weapons. These were physical projectiles accelerated to speeds that Lyra's mind struggled to comprehend. The tactical display registered velocities at 0.3 light speed. Solid metal moving at relativistic speeds. The first Ravager bioship simply ceased to exist. The tungsten penetrator struck its forward section and transferred so much kinetic energy that the entire vessel explosively decompressed. The projectile continued through, striking the bioship behind it with barely diminished force. 17 Ravager vessels died in the first volley. The hive mind recoiled in shock. Such losses in seconds violated everything their evolutionary experience had prepared them for. By the ancestors, Wren breathed. What kind of weapons are those? Lyra checked her console data. Mass drivers. Primitive kinetic weapons. But the acceleration involved requires power generation beyond our capabilities, and the targeting computers must be incredibly precise to hit moving targets at those velocities. The Ravagers adapted. Their remaining bioships rippled and changed, hulls thickening and hardening. Dense organic armor grew across their surfaces. Against energy weapons, it would have been effective. The second human volley used different ammunition. These projectiles glowed white-hot as they crossed the distance. Upon impact, they detonated with the signature flash of nuclear fusion. The bioship's new armor provided no protection against plasma temperatures measured in millions of degrees. 23 more. Ravager vessels became expanding clouds of superheated gas. The hive mind tried again. Some bioships generated electromagnetic shields while others secreted metallic compounds to deflect solid projectiles. The diversity of responses showed the Ravagers' desperation. The third human volley split apart mid-flight. Each projectile became dozens of smaller munitions that spread into wide patterns. Submunitions overwhelmed the scattered defenses, finding gaps and weak points with mechanical precision. They are not allowing adaptation, Lyra realized. Every time the Ravagers changed, the humans simply used something different. Pax nodded enthusiastically. And they have not repeated a single weapon type. How many different attack methods do they possess? The battle continued with brutal efficiency. The humans advanced steadily, their wall formation maintaining perfect cohesion. Projectiles flew in carefully timed volleys, each one employing different physics to bypass whatever defense the Ravagers had just created. Walsh's voice remained calm throughout. Fourth volley loaded. Exotic matter warheads fire. Lyra did not recognize the technology. The projectiles seemed to bend space around themselves, and when they struck, Ravager bioships simply collapsed inward as if crushed by invisible hands. In 47 minutes, the battle ended. 300 Ravager bioships reduced to debris and cooling vapor. The human fleet maintained formation, weapons still charged, ready for any surviving threats. None appeared. The command center stood in absolute silence. Finally, Wren spoke. Commodore Walsh, the Coalition owes you an immeasurable debt. You have saved millions of lives today. Just doing our part, Admiral. Now, with your permission, we would like to approach the refugee convoy. Our medical and engineering teams are standing by to assist. Lyra felt that chill return. Ships that could destroy the Ravagers so completely now wanted access to helpless civilians. She looked at Wren and saw her own fear reflected in his eyes. They had just watched the galaxy's most effective killing machines at work. What did humanity want as payment? The refugee convoy drifted in formation 300,000 kilometers from the battlefield. 2 million souls packed into cargo vessels, passenger liners, and converted mining ships. Everything that could hold atmosphere and sustain life had been pressed into service. Lyra watched the human fleet approach and felt her stomach tighten with worry. Commodore Walsh had requested permission to send aid. Admiral Wren had granted it because refusing seemed both rude and pointless. If humans wanted something from the convoy, They possessed the firepower to simply take it. Better to maintain the illusion of cooperation. 20 human vessels detached from the main formation and moved toward the refugee ships with surprising gentleness. Their brutal angular designs seemed almost cautious as they maneuvered into protective positions around the convoy. Lyra noted how they positioned themselves between the civilians and any potential threats, their weapon arrays facing outward. Reading power fluctuations from the human ships, Pax reported. They are extending their shield generators. The energy fields now encompass the entire convoy. Wren's scaled brow ridges rose. They are protecting them. Cargo shuttles began launching from the human vessels. Small craft, each carrying supplies rather than weapons. They approached the refugee ships slowly, transmitting identification codes and requesting docking permission. The convoy coordinator, overwhelmed and exhausted, granted access. Lyra pulled up reports as they came in. Human crew members were transferring food supplies. Medical teams were beaming over to ships reporting injured or sick passengers. Engineering specialists were offering to repair damaged systems. All of it provided freely. No contracts discussed, no payment demanded. This makes no sense, Lyra murmured. Species with military power this significant do not simply give away resources. Her console chimed with an incoming transmission. Commodore Walsh was requesting a face-to-face meeting aboard the Coalition command ship. Lyra looked to Wren, who nodded approval. 20 minutes later, Lyra stood in the docking bay and watched a human shuttle settle onto the deck with barely a whisper of thruster noise. The airlock cycled and Commodore Walsh emerged. The human woman stood roughly Lyra's height but carried herself with a bearing that suggested extensive combat experience. Scars marked her face and hands. Her uniform was practical rather than decorative, designed for function over appearance. But her eyes surprised Lyra most. They were kind. Ambassador Lyra, Walsh said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I wanted to speak with you directly about our intentions here. Lyra grasped the offered hand briefly, noting the surprising strength in Walsh's grip. Commodore, the Coalition is grateful for your intervention. The Ravagers would have broken through our lines without your assistance. However, I must be direct. Your military capabilities far exceed anything in our databases. What does humanity want in exchange for this aid? Walsh smiled, though sadness touched the expression. We want nothing. Earth sent us to help, so we are helping. I understand why you find this suspicious. In your position, I would too. They walked together through the corridors toward a conference room. Walsh moved with the efficiency of someone accustomed to shipboard life, though Lyra noticed how the human constantly assessed her surroundings with quick glances. A warrior's habit never truly relaxed. May I ask you something personal? Walsh said. What do you know about Earth? Lyra accessed her database implant. Very little. Your world made first contact 53 cycles ago. Your species achieved faster-than-light capability approximately 60 cycles ago. Coalition observers classified Earth as a Category 12 Deathworld and recommended limited contact. Category 12, Walsh repeated. The nice way of saying our planet is a nightmare that somehow produced intelligent life. I meant no offense. None taken. It is accurate. Walsh stopped walking and turned to face Lyra directly. Earth kills us in 1,000 different ways. Weather that can level cities in hours, earthquakes that reshape continents, gravity that breaks bones if we are not careful. We evolved to survive in hell. Lyra felt uncomfortable with the human's intensity but stayed silent. For most of our history, we fought each other. Walsh continued. Constant war. Terrible weapons. We nearly destroyed ourselves more times than I can count. The worst was about 70 cycles ago. Nuclear exchange. 60 million dead in a matter of weeks. Mostly civilians, children. The sadness in Walsh's eyes deepened. That finally taught us. We looked at what we had done to ourselves and realized we had to change. It took decades, but we achieved unity. One government, one purpose, one goal. They resumed walking. Walsh seemed to be organizing her thoughts carefully. When we received your distress call, Earth was holding a memorial service for that old war. 70 cycles of peace remembering 70 cycles of killing. The message arrived right in the middle of the ceremony. Walsh's voice grew quiet. We mobilized this fleet in 6 months because we remember what it feels like to be helpless against overwhelming force. We developed these weapons because we know how to fight impossible odds, and we came to help because we learned, finally, that strength must serve something beyond itself. They reached the conference room. Through the viewport, the refugee convoy was visible, now surrounded by the protective embrace of human warships. "You asked what we want," Walsh said. "We want to make sure that Memorial Service 70 cycles from now still commemorates peace. We want to prove that a species can climb out of its own darkness. We want the galaxy to know that being powerful and being kind are not mutually exclusive." Lyra studied the human's face, searching for deception and finding none. "Your weapons are terrifying, Commodore. The efficiency with which you destroyed the Ravagers was unlike anything I have ever witnessed." "I know." Walsh did not look away. "We are very good at war because we practiced on ourselves for thousands of cycles. Every tactic we use today was originally designed to fight other humans. We studied violence until we became experts at it. And now we choose to be experts at something else. Protection. We will guard the Coalition's borders. We will face threats you cannot handle. We will be the dangerous thing that keeps you safe." Walsh placed her hand against the viewport. "That convoy out there represents everything we almost destroyed on our own world. Families, children, hope for the future. We will never let them fall to something like the Ravagers." Lyra felt something shift in her understanding. "You did not come here to conquer." "No. We came to keep a promise humanity made to itself 70 cycles ago. Never again. Never again will we use our strength to destroy when we could use it to protect." Admiral Wren entered the conference room, having listened to the conversation through the communication system. "Commodore Walsh, I believe the Coalition has severely underestimated humanity. You are not the primitive species our records suggested." Walsh laughed without humor. "Oh, we are primitive, Admiral. We just learned to weaponize our primitiveness before it killed us. The Coalition species spent millions of cycles developing technology through peaceful cooperation. Humans spent thousands of cycles developing technology through competition and conflict. Different paths to similar destinations. Will you stay?" Lyra asked. "Will you help us defend against future Ravager incursions?" "We will stay as long as you need us. Earth is sending more ships along with defense platforms and supply depots. We are establishing a permanent fleet presence in Coalition space." Walsh met both their gazes. "But we will never demand authority over Coalition species. We will never claim territory or enforce our values on others. We are here as equals and friends if you will have us." Wren extended his hand in the human gesture Walsh had taught them. The Coalition would be honored to count humanity among its allies. Through the viewport, human medical teams worked alongside Coalition doctors in the refugee ships. Engineering crews shared techniques and technology freely. Two different approaches to civilization meeting for the first time, finding common ground and compassion. Lyra realized something profound. The galaxy had assumed that power and kindness existed in opposition, that species became either strong or good but never both. Humanity was proving that assumption wrong. They had become the galaxy's apex predators and then chose to use those teeth to guard the helpless, the most dangerous species in known space, deciding to be gentle, and somehow that made them even more remarkable. The medical bay aboard the Coalition vessel hummed with activity. Lyra moved between beds where refugees received treatment, observing how human and Coalition medical staff worked together. A Tamari doctor discussed surgical techniques with a human medic, their different approaches complementing each other surprisingly well. She needed to understand these humans better. The battle had been over for 6 hours, and already they had integrated themselves into Coalition operations as if they had been allies for cycles rather than minutes. It felt unnatural. This easy cooperation from a species that had appeared out of nowhere with overwhelming military force. Lyra returned to her quarters and accessed the Coalition's xenological database. The entry on humanity was brief, marked with caution flags and restricted access warnings. She used her diplomatic credentials to override the restrictions. What she found made her blood run cold. Earth's official designation was Class 12 Deathworld, the highest danger category. Only 3 other sapient species in recorded history had evolved on similar planets. All 3 had destroyed themselves through warfare before achieving interstellar capability. Earth should have followed the same pattern. The planet's statistics read like something from a horror story. Atmospheric oxygen levels high enough to fuel massive wildfires. Weather systems that generated storms with wind speeds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour. Tectonic activity that caused regular earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Gravity 40% higher than galactic standard. Temperature swings that ranged from freezing to lethally hot depending on latitude and season. Coalition observers had documented over 60 distinct ways the planet actively tried to kill its inhabitants. Poisonous plants, venomous animals, microscopic organisms that caused fatal diseases, large predators with strength enough to tear apart smaller creatures. Even the water contained dangers, with predators that could consume prey twice their size. Yet humans had not merely survived. They had thrived. They had spread across every continent, adapted to every environment, conquered every ecological niche. They had become the planet's apex predator, through a combination of endurance, intelligence, and sheer stubborn determination. Lyra read deeper, finding classified reports from coalition anthropologists who had studied human development. Their findings were disturbing. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. They could not run as fast as their prey, so they simply followed for days until the target collapsed from exhaustion. Their bodies could regulate temperature through liquid secretion, allowing them to remain active in heat that would kill most species. They healed from injuries that would be permanently crippling to others. They could survive weeks without food, days without water, and push their bodies beyond normal limits through pure force of will. Psychologically, they were adaptable to the point of being unstable. They formed strong emotional bonds but could also commit extraordinary violence. They created beautiful art and terrible weapons with equal skill. They loved deeply and hated intensely. They were walking contradictions, capable of genocide and compassion in the same generation. The military analysis made Lyra's hands tremble as she read. Humans had been waging war against each other for their entire recorded history. Over 10,000 cycles of continuous conflict. They had refined warfare into a precise science, developing strategies and technologies specifically designed to kill other humans. Their weapons development followed a terrifying progression. Simple clubs and spears gave way to bows and swords, then gunpowder weapons, then chemical weapons, then nuclear weapons capable of rendering entire regions uninhabitable for generations. They had created bombs powerful enough to destroy cities in single explosions, and delivered them from aircraft flying too high to intercept. The Coalition had been fighting the Ravagers for 5 cycles and losing. Humans had been fighting themselves for 5,000 cycles and learning. Lyra found a video file marked as restricted. She opened it despite the warning. The footage showed a human city being destroyed by nuclear weapons during their final Great War. She watched buildings vaporize in thermal flash. Millions of lives ended in seconds. The mushroom cloud rising into the atmosphere like a monument to madness. 60 million dead. That was the number Commodore Walsh had mentioned. 60 million humans killed by other humans in a matter of weeks. The Coalition's entire military force numbered barely 200,000 across 47 species. Humans had killed 300 times that number of their own kind, yet they had stopped. They had looked at what they had done and somehow found the strength to change. Lyra accessed more recent data. After their final war, humans had unified their planet under a single governing body. They had dismantled their nuclear arsenals. They had redirected their military-industrial complex toward space exploration and defense. They had taken everything they learned about destruction and repurposed it for protection. The ships that had destroyed the Ravagers so efficiently were built using weapons, technology originally designed for human-on-human conflict. The mass drivers were scaled-up versions of orbital bombardment systems. The exotic matter warheads were modified from weapons meant to crack hardened bunkers. Even their tactics came from military doctrines written to fight other human nations. Everything that made them terrifying came from fighting themselves. Lyra found psychological profiles on human behavior. Coalition xenopsychologists had struggled to understand how a species could be simultaneously violent and compassionate. The report suggested humans possessed unusual empathy for a predator species. They formed emotional bonds not just with their own kind but with other species, even non-sapient animals. They kept pets, creatures they did not eat but instead loved like family members. They wept over fictional stories. They felt guilt over necessary violence. They were killers who felt bad about killing. The door chimed. Lyra closed the files and admitted Admiral Wren. The older warrior looked troubled. "You have been reading the human files," he said. It was not a question. Yes. Then you understand what we have invited into the Coalition. Lyra moved to the viewport. Human ships patrolled outside, their weapons still powered, always ready. I understand that we would all be dead without them. True. But what happens when their interests diverge from ours? What happens if they decide to conquer rather than protect? Ren stood beside her. A species capable of killing 60 million of their own could exterminate the coalition without remorse. They had the power to conquer us today. Instead, they chose to save us. Today, what about tomorrow? What about 100 cycles from now when they have grown tired of being protectors? Lyra had no answer. She thought about Commodore Walsh, the sadness in her eyes when speaking of humanity's war, the genuine desire to prove her species could be better. I think they are trying to atone, Lyra said finally. They committed terrible acts against themselves and now seek redemption by protecting others. Redemption through violence? Redemption through choosing when not to use violence. They possess the capability for total destruction and deliberately employ only precise force. The Ravagers were eliminated, but the Coalition fleet was never at risk from human weapons. That suggests remarkable control. Ren considered this. You believe they can be trusted? I believe they are trying to trust themselves, and perhaps that is the same thing. They stood in silence, watching the human fleet maintain its protective formation. Somewhere on one of those ships, human crew members were sleeping between duty shifts, dreaming whatever dreams killers-turned-protectors dreamed. The galaxy's most dangerous species, serving as guardians. It was either the greatest hope for peace or the most elaborate trap ever conceived. Lyra suspected even the humans themselves did not know which it would be. They were as uncertain of their own nature as anyone else, but they were trying. That had to count for something. 3 cycles later, reports began arriving from other sectors. Ravager incursions collapsing as human fleets appeared with the same devastating efficiency. Aggressive species that had threatened coalition borders for generations, suddenly requesting peace negotiations after hearing what happened to the Ravagers. Pirates and raiders disappearing from trade routes. The galaxy was recalibrating around a new equation. Humanity had introduced a variable that changed everything. Power without the restraint of evolution. Weapons without the wisdom of age. Strength choosing kindness not because it was required, but because it was right. Lyra updated her report to the Coalition Council. Her assessment was simple. Humanity was the most dangerous ally they would ever have. But dangerous was exactly what they needed. The galaxy's new protectors had arrived, and they carried both the tools of destruction and the will to use them only when necessary. Time would tell if they could maintain that balance. But for now, the helpless had guardians. And sometimes that was enough. The debris field stretched for thousands of kilometers. Fragments of Ravager bioships drifted through the darkness, already cooling in the absolute cold of space. Human salvage crews moved through the wreckage in small craft, cataloging the remains and ensuring no active threat survived. Lyra stood on the observation deck of Ren's flagship and watched the cleanup operation with mixed feelings. Victory should feel better than this. 2 million refugees were safe. The Ravager advance had been stopped. Coalition losses had been minimal thanks to human intervention. Yet she could not shake the sense that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy, and there was no going back. The refugee convoy is preparing to depart, Pax reported from his station. They are requesting an escort through the next 3 systems until they reach the resettlement colonies. Assign 6 coalition ships, Ren ordered. Then he paused and looked to Commodore Walsh, who had remained aboard the coalition flagship as a liaison. Unless you would prefer to handle escort duties? Walsh shook her head. Our ships are designed for combat, not convoy protection. We would likely frighten the civilians more than protect them. Your vessels are better suited for that role. It was a small gesture, but Lyra noticed it. Walsh declining an opportunity to demonstrate human superiority or insert themselves into coalition operations. The humans seemed genuinely committed to cooperation rather than dominance. However, Walsh continued, I would like to request a meeting with the refugee leadership before they depart. There are some things I want to say to them. Ren agreed, and within the hour, representatives from the refugee convoy assembled in the flagship's largest conference room. 30 different species crowded into the space. Families who had lost their homes to the Ravagers. Survivors of destroyed colonies. Children clinging to exhausted parents. Walsh entered alone without the armed escort that coalition protocol would normally require for such a meeting. She wore her uniform but had removed her sidearm, a gesture of trust that several refugees noticed. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Walsh said, her translator rendering her words into dozens of languages simultaneously. I know you have been through something terrible. I know you have lost homes, friends, family members. I know you are afraid. The room remained silent. Lyra watched the refugees study this human who had saved their lives. Some looked grateful. Others looked uncertain, even frightened. "I want you to know something about my people," Walsh continued. "Earth has known war for most of its history. We have been refugees ourselves. We have fled from violence and seen our cities burn. We understand what you are feeling right now." A Drazi child no more than 5 cycles old raised a tentacled appendage. "Did the bad things come to your world too?" Walsh knelt to be at the child's eye level. "The bad things on my world were other humans. We fought each other for a very long time. We hurt people who did not deserve to be hurt. We learned what it feels like to lose everything." "But you stopped?" the child asked. "We stopped. It took a long time and many mistakes, but we finally learned that fighting each other only makes everyone weaker. We learned that protecting each other makes everyone stronger." An elderly Tamari male spoke up, his voice shaking with age and exhaustion. "Why should we trust a species that admits to such violence? You destroyed the Ravagers with frightening efficiency. What prevents you from turning those weapons on us?" It was the question everyone wanted to ask but had been too polite or too afraid to voice. The room grew tense. Walsh stood and faced the elder directly. "Nothing prevents us. We possess the capability to cause terrible harm." "That is true. But capability is not the same as intent. Humans learned the difference between what we can do and what we should do." She gestured to the viewport where human ships maintained their patrol. "Those vessels were built to fight threats like the Ravagers. We created them because we knew the galaxy contained dangers, and we wanted to be able to protect those who could not protect themselves, not dominate them. Protect them." A Kel female, her fur marked with burn scars, spoke carefully. "Words are easy, human. Actions reveal truth. What do you want from us in exchange for your protection?" Walsh smiled sadly. "You sound like someone who has been disappointed before." "I understand. The galaxy has not always been kind to those who cannot defend themselves. But to answer your question, we want nothing from you. Earth sent us to help. Helping is its own reward." "That makes no sense," the Kel replied. "Every species acts in self-interest. What is your true goal?" "Our true goal is to prove we are better than we were. For thousands of cycles, humans killed each other over resources, territory, ideology, and sometimes just because we were angry or afraid. We nearly destroyed ourselves completely. Then we decided to change. But change requires proof. We need to demonstrate, to ourselves as much as anyone else, that we can use our strength to build rather than destroy." Walsh moved to the center of the room, addressing everyone. 70 cycles ago, Earth fought its last great war. 60 million people died, mostly civilians. Cities burned. Children died in their homes. We swore afterward that we would never allow such things to happen again. Not on our world and not on anyone else's world if we could prevent it. You failed to prevent the Ravagers from destroying our homes. Someone called out. "Yes, we did not know about the threat until recently. That failure haunts us, which is why we are here now, why we built this fleet, why we will continue to defend Coalition space. We cannot undo what was done to your worlds, but we can make sure it does not happen to others." The room remained skeptical. Lyra understood their doubt. Trust was hard to give when you had lost everything. A young Yorn male, barely into adulthood, stood. "I watched the Ravagers kill my family. I saw their bioships dissolve our orbital platforms. I have nightmares about the screams. When you destroyed them today, I felt satisfaction. Is that wrong?" Walsh's expression softened. "No, that is not wrong. Grief and anger are natural responses to loss. The Ravagers were not capable of negotiation or coexistence. They had to be stopped with force. You are allowed to feel satisfied that the threat is gone." "But you did not seem satisfied," the Yorn observed. "I watched video of the battle. Your fleet destroyed the enemy efficiently. But there was no celebration, no triumph. Why? Because killing, even necessary killing, is not something to celebrate. It is something to acknowledge as needed and then move past. We eliminated a threat. That was the job. Now the job is helping you rebuild." The elderly Tamari spoke again. "You have strange philosophy, humans. You are warriors who do not glory in war. We glory in what comes after war. Peace, safety, the chance to live without fear. War is a tool we learned to use very well, but it is not our purpose. Our purpose is protecting that peace." Walsh pulled up a holographic display showing Earth. The blue and green planet rotated slowly, clouds swirling across its surface. "This is our world. It is beautiful and terrible. It tried to kill us every day we existed on it. We survived by becoming dangerous enough to fight back. Then we learned that being dangerous also meant we could protect things that mattered. She expanded the image to show coalition space. You matter. All of you. Every species in the coalition matters. Your lives, your cultures, your futures. We will guard these things because we remember what it felt like to lose them ourselves. Silence filled the room as refugees processed her words. Lyra saw doubt beginning to shift, not to complete trust but to cautious hope. The Drazi child spoke again. Will you keep us safe from more bad things? Walsh knelt once more. We will try our very best. That is all anyone can promise. But I want you to know something important. You are not helpless. You survived the Ravagers. You protected your families. You made it to safety. That takes strength too. But we are not strong like you, the child said. Strength comes in different forms. Your people are builders, teachers, healers. Those are valuable strengths. Our people are fighters, different strengths for different purposes. Together we are all stronger. The refugees began asking practical questions after that. Where would they be resettled? Would humans maintain a protective fleet presence? How could they contact Earth if threats emerged? Walsh answered each question patiently, providing details and reassurance. As the meeting concluded, the Kel female who had been so skeptical approached Walsh privately. I still do not fully trust your people, human, but I'm grateful you were here today. My cubs would be dead without your intervention. Your cubs are safe. That is what matters. If you truly mean what you say about protection, prove it with time. Words and single actions can deceive. Consistency reveals truth. Walsh extended her hand. We will prove it, however long it takes. The Kel studied the offered hand before grasping it. Then perhaps your species will surprise me. The galaxy could use more pleasant surprises. The refugees departed slowly, boarding their vessels for the journey to new homes. Human ships maintained their protective formation until the convoy jumped to faster-than-light travel, then returned to patrol routes. Lyra found Walsh on the observation deck hours later. The human stared out at the stars with an unreadable expression. You carry guilt, Lyra observed. I can see it in how you speak about your past. We killed 60 million of our own. That guilt does not simply disappear. But your current generation did not commit those acts. Why carry the burden? Walsh turned to face her. Because if we forget what we were capable of, we might become capable of it again. The guilt reminds us to be better. It motivates us to prove that our species learned from its mistakes. That is a heavy weight to bear. Yes, but it is our weight, and we choose to carry it by protecting others. Every life we save is proof that we changed. Every threat we stop is evidence that strength can serve kindness. Lyra understood then. Humanity was not seeking redemption from anyone else. They were seeking redemption from themselves. The galaxy had become their chance to prove they could be more than destroyers. I hope you find what you are looking for, Lyra said quietly. Walsh smiled. We already have. We found people worth protecting. Everything else is just details. The human returned her gaze to the stars and Lyra left her in peace. Some journeys were personal, meant to be traveled alone. Humanity's path from violence to protection was their own to walk. The coalition could only watch and hope they continued choosing kindness over their clearly fearsome capabilities. Time would reveal their true nature. For now, the helpless had guardians who understood loss, and sometimes shared pain was the foundation of the strongest bonds. 3 cycles passed before Lyra truly understood the change that had come to the galaxy. She watched it happen in small moments scattered across coalition space. A human medical frigate arriving at a plague-stricken colony within hours of the distress call. Human engineers sharing manufacturing techniques with Drazi industrial guilds. Human patrol ships responding to pirate attacks, and then helping repair damaged trading vessels afterward. They were everywhere suddenly, not invading or conquering, but integrating themselves into the fabric of coalition society as if they had always belonged. Their ships became familiar sights on trade routes. Their personnel became known faces in coalition facilities. They brought their efficiency, their technology, their protective instincts, and somehow made it all seem natural. The Ravager War ended with surprising speed. 17 systems liberated in 3 cycles. Human fleets appeared, destroyed the swarms, and immediately began humanitarian operations. They did not claim the freed territories. They did not demand payment. They simply moved to the next threat. Other aggressive species took notice. The Karn, who had raided coalition borders for generations, suddenly expressed interest in peace negotiations. The Vex Collective, known for territorial expansion, withdrew from disputed systems without explanation. Word spread quickly. There were humans now, and they responded to threats with overwhelming force. Lyra attended the first formal Coalition Council meeting that included human representation. Commodore Walsh had been promoted to Admiral and given authority to speak for Earth's interests. She entered the council chamber with minimal ceremony, flanked by 2 aides who looked uncomfortable with all the political formality. 47 species sent their representatives. The chamber was designed as a circular amphitheater where everyone could see everyone else, reinforcing the coalition's principles of equality. Walsh took her assigned seat without fanfare. The Drazi Council Elder opened proceedings. We gathered to formally acknowledge humanity's contribution to coalition security and to discuss their integration into our governing structure. Admiral Walsh, Earth's intervention against the Ravagers saved millions of lives. The coalition is deeply grateful. Earth was honored to assist, Walsh replied. We did what anyone should do when neighbors face existential threats. Nevertheless, your capabilities raise important questions about balance of power within coalition space. Your military force exceeds the combined strength of all coalition members. How do we ensure this power is not abused? It was a fair question, one that had been whispered in diplomatic circles since the first battle. Walsh seemed to have expected it. The coalition should establish oversight committees that monitor human military operations. We will provide full transparency about fleet movements, weapons development, and strategic planning. Any coalition species should have the right to question our actions and demand explanations. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the chamber. Powerful species did not typically volunteer for restrictions on their authority. The Yorn representative spoke next. You would submit to coalition oversight despite possessing the strength to ignore us? Power without accountability is tyranny, Walsh said simply. Earth learned that lesson through hard experience. We will not repeat old mistakes. Ren, now representing Tamari interests on the council, raised a question. What does Earth want in exchange for military protection? Resources? Territory? Political influence? We want to be good neighbors. That means contributing to collective security without demanding special treatment. Earth will accept equal representation on the council, nothing more. Equal representation? The Kel ambassador seemed confused. Your species alone could dominate coalition decision-making through military threat. We could. But that would make us conquerors rather than allies. Earth seeks alliance, not dominance. The council session continued for hours. Practical matters were discussed. Fleet coordination protocols, communication standards, resource sharing agreements, joint training exercises. Throughout it all, Walsh and her team demonstrated genuine interest in cooperation rather than control. During a recess, Lyra approached Walsh in a side corridor. You are winning them over. Am I? I cannot tell. Diplomatic subtlety is not my strength. I am a soldier trying to do politics. You are being honest. That carries its own power. Walsh smiled. Honest is easy. Earth has nothing to hide. We came to help and we mean it. The complicated part is convincing everyone that we will not change our minds later. The Kel ambassador makes a valid point. Your species could dominate through threat of force. Could. But humanity dominated itself through force for thousands of cycles, and it only brought suffering. We are trying a different approach now. Being strong enough to conquer but choosing not to. Being dangerous enough to threaten but deciding to protect instead. Lyra chose her next words carefully. Some council members fear you are too good to be true. They suspect hidden motives. Of course they do. Trust is earned, not given. We understand that. Walsh gazed out a viewport at the diverse collection of ships gathered for the council meeting. Let them be suspicious. Let them watch us. Let them question everything we do. Eventually our actions will speak louder than any promises. The council session resumed. New topics emerged. The Vex Collective had requested formal negotiations to resolve border disputes. The Karn wanted to discuss trade agreements. Both messages specifically mentioned human presence as a factor in their decisions. They are afraid of you, the Drazi elder observed. These aggressive species are pursuing peace because they witnessed what you did to the Ravagers. Walsh nodded. Fear can be a starting point for peace. Not the best starting point, but sometimes it is what works. If they are too afraid to attack, then coalition members remain safe. Fear can evolve into respect, and respect into genuine cooperation. You are comfortable being feared? I am comfortable with whatever keeps people safe. Humanity spent too long caring about being liked. Being effective is more important. A younger council member, a Yorn barely past adolescence, spoke with surprising boldness. I fought the Ravagers before you arrived. I saw my unit destroyed. Your power frightens me, but it also makes me feel secure for the first time in cycles. Is it wrong to be both afraid and grateful? Walsh's expression softened. No, that is not wrong. That is sensible. We are dangerous. Pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But we have chosen to direct that danger toward threats, not toward allies. You are right to be cautious, and you are right to feel safer. How do we know you will always make that choice? You do not know. You have to trust us, and trust is difficult. All I can say is that Earth has spent 70 cycles maintaining peace with itself. We have had opportunities to return to our violent ways. We have faced resource conflicts, political disagreements, cultural tensions. Every time we chose to resolve things without warfare. That pattern should count for something. The council debated late into the cycle. Eventually they reached consensus. Humanity would be granted full coalition membership with equal representation. Human fleets would coordinate with coalition military forces under joint command structures. Oversight committees would monitor human operations. Technology exchanges would be pursued carefully with safeguards to prevent destabilization. It was a framework for cooperation built on cautious optimism and healthy skepticism. Walsh seemed satisfied with the arrangement. As the council adjourned, Lyra walked with Walsh back toward the docking bays. You handled the politics better than you claimed. I told the truth and let them decide what to do with it. That is not skill, just honesty. Will Earth truly accept oversight from species that possess far less military power? Why would we not? The coalition has wisdom we lack. Your species learned to cooperate millions of cycles ago. Ours learned barely 70 cycles ago. We should listen to those who have succeeded where we previously failed. They reached Walsh's shuttle. The human paused before boarding. Do you believe we can maintain this balance? Staying dangerous enough to protect, but gentle enough not to threaten? Lyra considered carefully. I believe you are trying. Whether you succeed depends on choices your species makes over time. But trying is more than most powerful species bother to do. That will have to be enough for now. Walsh boarded her shuttle. Thank you for giving humanity a chance to prove itself. The months that followed established new patterns. Human fleets patrolled coalition borders but answered to joint command authority. Human technology was shared but slowly and with safeguards. Human personnel trained alongside coalition forces, learning different tactical approaches and sharing their own knowledge. Incidents occurred. A human patrol ship destroyed a pirate vessel with what some considered excessive force. A human engineering team inadvertently violated cultural protocols on a Drazi colony. Human directness offended species accustomed to subtle diplomacy. But they learned. They adapted. They apologized when appropriate and modified their behavior. They demonstrated the same flexibility that had allowed them to survive their terrible homeworld. Lyra received reports from across coalition space. Everywhere humans operated, violence decreased. Trade increased. Aggressive species became more cautious. Pirates found easier targets elsewhere. The Ravager swarms, broken by human military action, retreated to deep space and were not heard from again. Peace enforced by the threat of overwhelming human response. It was not the peace the coalition had known before, built on mutual agreement and shared values. This was a more primal peace, based on understanding that certain lines could not be crossed without facing consequences. But it was peace. Wren visited Lyra's office one afternoon with news. The council is proposing a new memorial. A monument to the Battle of Thousand Suns. They want to acknowledge humanity's intervention. What does Admiral Walsh think? She declined to attend the dedication ceremony, said it was not about celebrating warriors but remembering those who were lost. Lyra smiled. Very human. Possessing the power to dominate and choosing humility instead. Do you trust them now? More than I did 3 cycles ago. They have had opportunities to break their promises and have not. Time will reveal whether this continues, but the early evidence is encouraging. She pulled up a status report showing human fleet positions throughout coalition space. Over 500 vessels now, all operating under joint command authority. Behind them, Earth was building more. fortifying coalition borders, creating a defensive umbrella that covered 47 different species. They are building an empire of protection, Wren observed. Is that so terrible? They could have built an empire of conquest. At least they are choosing the better option. For now. Yes. For now. We watch, we verify, we remain cautious. But we also acknowledge what they have given us. Security. Hope. The chance to live without fear of species like the Ravagers. Wren departed, leaving Lyra alone with her thoughts. She accessed files on Earth again, reading about their history. All that violence, all those wars, all that suffering. They had climbed out of darkness through effort and will. They had looked at what they were and decided to become something better. The galaxy had assumed such transformation was impossible. Species were what evolution made them. Predators remained predators. Peace-loving species remained peaceful. The idea that a violent species could choose gentleness seemed to violate natural law. But humans were proving otherwise. They carried the capacity for terrible violence and the will to restrain it. They possessed weapons that could crack planets and the wisdom to use them only when necessary. They were dangerous by nature and kind by choice. The combination was unprecedented, unnatural, revolutionary. Lyra composed her final report to the Coalition Historical Archives. Future generations would read about these days and wonder how it all began. She tried to capture the essential truth in simple words. Humanity entered the galaxy like a storm. They brought weapons beyond our understanding, and tactics refined through millennia of warfare. They destroyed our enemies with efficiency that frightened us. Then they did something no one expected. They chose to be gentle with that power. We do not know if this choice will last. Time may reveal flaws in their resolve, but for now the galaxy has guardians who understand both violence and restraint. They have become the dangerous thing that keeps us safe. They call themselves human. We call them protectors. History will determine which name carries more truth. The memorial was built despite Walsh's absence. A simple stone monument on the colony world nearest to where the Battle of Thousand Suns occurred. It listed the names of those killed fighting the Ravagers, and included a single line acknowledging human intervention. On the day they were needed most, humanity answered. Lyra attended the dedication ceremony. Representatives from all 47 coalition species gathered. Human ships maintained patrol overhead, visible as bright points of light against the day sky. Walsh had declined to attend, but she sent a message that was read aloud to the assembled crowd. It was brief, characteristically direct. We came because you needed help. We fought because the threat was real. We stayed because protecting others gives our strength purpose. We are honored to serve alongside the coalition. We hope never to be needed again, but will always answer when called. Simple words. No grand promises, no dramatic declarations. Just a commitment to continue being what they had chosen to become. The crowd dispersed slowly. Lyra remained at the memorial reading the names of the dead. So many lives lost before the humans arrived. So many more saved because they did. She thought about Walsh's question from cycles ago. Could humanity maintain the balance between power and restraint? Would they continue choosing protection over conquest? No one knew. The future remained unwritten. But the present showed a species trying very hard to be better than its past. And that trying, that conscious daily choice to use strength for good, was worth celebrating. The galaxy had new guardians. They were imperfect, haunted by history, dangerous by design. But they were here and they were trying. Sometimes trying was enough.